Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
Okay. Do you agree that the death penalty should be legal in all 50 states? And if so, why?
That's more of a political question than a legal question.
Yes, sir.
And I don't, that's not what I do. I think each state, each country has their own opinion about the death penalty,
Yes,
and
sir.
that's a political decision that people make either by electing legislators to go to the state legislatures. And you know, this country is in a distinct minority of countries that permit the death penalty.
Yes, sir.
All the countries in Europe that I'm aware of, Canada, Mexico, they do not have the death penalty. My opinion about the death penalty, I'm not sure how relevant that is to anything, but I mean, I was a prosecutor for 6 years,
Yes, sir.
and I prosecuted death penalty cases. And I've been a defense lawyer for 30-some years, and I have defended death penalty cases. So I've seen it from both sides.
Yes, sir.
We, in the legal profession, are trained to interpret and enforce the law. We don't make the laws. So when the question is, do I believe the death penalty should be valid in all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, I'm not sure that that's a question that I can answer, because that's a political question, not a legal question.
Yes, sir. But
Okay.
if you were to have like your own opinion on whether it should be legal or not, what would it be?
That's a hard question, because I'm not trying to weasel out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen cases where the death penalty should be applied. People who are mass murderers, people who kill children.
Yes, sir.
I've seen cases where that calls for the imposition of the death penalty. I've also seen a lot of cases that were prosecuted as death penalty cases that should never have been death penalty cases. I think it is an independent decision that each prosecutor, each judge, each juror has to make in weighing the factors. One of the things that I've printed out for you are the North Carolina death penalty statutes
Mm-hmm.
that set up the scheme for how we try death penalty cases. And essentially, the jury has to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, A, of a person's guilt,
Mm-hmm.
and B, that the case is serious enough to call for the imposition of the death penalty. Then you get into a weighing of aggravating and mitigating circumstances that call for the imposition or not of the death penalty. All of those decisions are made by 12 jurors who come in and don't know anything about the case.
Mm-hmm.
So, philosophically, am I in favor or opposed to the death penalty? I would probably tell you that right now, as it's applied, I'm opposed to it.
Yes, sir.
I have in the past been in favor of it, because I have stood before juries as a prosecutor and asked them to impose the death penalty in several cases.
So you believe it depends on the case?
Yes, it
Okay.
completely and totally depends on the circumstances. The decision about whether there is a death penalty or not, I think, is a separate decision. Right now, in North Carolina, we have the death penalty for capital murder. That's the only case that you can be subject to the death penalty for.
Yes, sir.
That has not always been the case. Historically, other things have had the death penalty applied, but not anymore, not in North Carolina or any other state in the United States.
Okay.
I don't know whether I answered that or not,
Yeah, you
but that's the
answered it.
best I could do, because it is a question that should receive serious debate, and it is a question that you really don't get a second chance to make a mistake about. The evidence has to be, overwhelming before I think a jury should impose the death penalty.
Yes, sir.
When you're making that decision, you don't just take that lightly. That is a serious moment to contemplate. On to question number 2.
how many years of experience have you had with this certain topic?
I started practicing law in 1976, and I have practiced law continuously since then. So that's what, 39 years if you're a math major?
Yeah.
The first 6 years, I was a prosecutor, and that was when I tried all kinds of cases, death penalty cases, rape cases, all sorts of things. I was the state's lawyer, the DA. Then I left the DA's office in beginning of 1983, and I've been in private practice defending people who were charged. I've tried everything. I don't think I've ever tried a parking ticket case, but I've tried everything from larceny cases to capital murder cases, representing the people who were charged. I'm a lawyer in private practice now, and I've tried a lot of murder cases over the years.
Okay.
So the short answer to your question is 39 years.
39 years. How has this topic impacted your life?
It's situational. When you're in the middle of a murder case, it sort of takes over your life. But one of the things that happens with lawyers, and it happens with doctors and dentists and other people, is we don't take these cases personally. If you take the cases personally, you lose your objectivity. We're not here to judge people. I'm here as a defense lawyer to protect people and to make sure that they receive a fair trial.
Sure.
And that's how it affects your life, because you spend your waking hours trying to make sure that you don't overlook something or make a mistake, or, mess up. But I think when you're in the middle of a trial, that's the only thing that you're thinking about. So really, you get swept up in that, and you're trying to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. But you try not to take that home with you, and you try not to get personally involved in the case, because then you lose your objectivity and you may miss something. Okay?
How did you become an expert in this field?
Well, I don't know that I don't know that anyone is ever an expert in the field of trying murder cases. You try them over and over and over again, and you just develop a sense of what's important and what isn't. And there are always lots of emotional issues that go on, and you sort of have to strip those away and say, all right, how do these facts mesh up with what the law says? Because what you got to do is you've got to start with what the law says. You've got to see what defines first-degree murder. You've got to see what defines second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, those types of things. So each one of those crimes has a certain set of specifications, if you will. And in order to be guilty of that certain crime, the jury has got to find evidence of each and every one of the elements of first-degree murder or second-degree murder, something like that. If one of those elements is lacking, then the jury can't convict you. So what you do is you try to find the weakness in the state's case and sort of work on that to get that in the jury's mind foremost. And so in terms of how you do it, that's kind of how you do it. It's a building block process.
Okay.
But I would never say to you that I'm an expert in the field. I've tried many murder cases, but each one has its own set of facts. Each one is different, and each case is absolutely unique.
Yes, sir. Do you believe there should be more attention paid to cases involving the death penalty?
Do you mean in terms of the public, or in terms of the way the court system
In
handles
terms
it?
of like the public.
I think that's a function of the press rather than, see, one of the things that we try to do, or try not to do, is to try our cases in the newspaper or on TV, because they're not held to any objective standard. They're looking for sensational headlines and 10-second sound bites. And I don't mean this as any criticism of them, but most of the reporters, well, in fact, all the reporters that I've seen over 39 years, none of them have been lawyers, so they sort of don't know what the legal issues are.
Yes, sir.
We are prohibited by the rules of the North Carolina Bar Association from trying our case in the public. We're not supposed to have press releases. We're not supposed to talk to the press about these cases, because that can sort of skew the way the facts are interpreted.
Okay.
So that's sort of how I feel about that. I'll never talk to the press about my cases.
Yes, sir.
They call, I say, no comment. They need to do their job, and I need to do mine.
About the appeals process concerning the death penalty in cases involving the death penalty, can you just go into more detail about that?
Sure. If a person in North Carolina in state court is convicted and received the death penalty, their cases are automatically appealed to the North Carolina Supreme Court. And the North Carolina Supreme Court exhaustively reviews all of the testimony, all of the paperwork, all the pleadings in the case, and they make a decision about whether the person received a fair trial. If the Supreme Court says the person didn't receive a fair trial, they can send the case back for a new trial. Or they may say a capital murder trial has two phases, and they're separate and distinct, but they have the same jury. The first one is the guilt or innocence part of the case, and that's where the jury decides whether the person did what they were charged with, or whether they're guilty of one of the underlying offenses like second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter. And the second part of the case is the punishment phase. If the jury convicts someone of first-degree capital murder, then the jury makes the determination about whether the punishment is life or death. That's unlike any other case, because in a regular case, the jury decides whether the person is guilty or not, say breaking and entering or larceny. And once they make the decision that the person is guilty, then the judge looks at the statute books and comes up with a sentence to give them. In a capital murder case, the jury makes the ultimate decision about whether the person lives or dies. Okay? So that's how that part of the system works. I think that when a case, well, let's take a situation where the North Carolina Supreme Court says that it was a fair trial, the imposition of the death penalty was appropriate, and they uphold the conviction and the death sentence. Then that person has a number of appeals through the federal system all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
And that is a long and exhaustive process. I mean, generally speaking, it takes more than 10 years to get through the appellate process in a capital murder case. There have been towns where cases were tried capitally that almost bankrupted the town, because in a case where someone is indigent and can't pay a lawyer, then the state has to appoint a lawyer, and sometimes that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Okay?
So, do you believe that life in prison is ultimately a better option than the death penalty?
You're asking very good questions. I mean, these are very insightful questions, and I really appreciate it, because I think that what you're asking kind of goes to the heart of the political discussion that I was talking about with the first question about whether I believe in capital punishment or not. Lawyers are used to making arguments on both sides. I mean, that's why I prosecuted and defended death penalty cases.
But you had, I'm sorry, I'm not even trying to interrupt you, but you had your own,
you need to focus
opinion.
on what we're doing.
Yeah.
You're running out of battery.
I
I
am.
heard one of them beep.
Oh.
But I think that the way, and I've seen this evolve over the time that I've been practicing. When I first started practicing, a life sentence meant that the person could be eligible for parole after 25 years. And then the legislature changed that to make the punishment for first-degree murder either life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty.
Yes, sir.
And so now those are the two options for first-degree murder. But again, I think it is a political decision about whether or not, I mean, there is an argument to be made that life imprisonment without parole puts aside the worst offenders. And the problem with that is you can't assume that someone who's serving life without parole isn't going to kill a guard or kill another inmate.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens a lot. So that's an argument for maybe not doing that. What the people, the criminologists would say, if you don't give someone a chance at redemption or a hope of anything for the future, why in the world would they behave in the prison system?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole theory about the parole system is if you go in, you know, keep your nose clean, don't get in any fights, don't get in any infractions, then you're going to get out and get sent back into the world. Life without parole generally means that people are on lockdown 23 hours out of a 24-hour cycle, and they get out for 1 hour. I mean, there are an awful lot of psychologists now who say that in and of itself is cruel and unusual punishment and makes people psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, I mean, you would hope that you never hear the argument, in this argument, you don't hear about people talking about, well, what can we do to prevent these cases to begin with? Because, you know, by the time I get a case, somebody's dead. My theory about that, again, this is probably political as well, we need to address the issues that are causing the unrest, that are causing this gun violence, that create these cases in the court system to begin with. And so, you know, again, you can't divorce the politics from what I do, because everything that happens in the courthouse is generated by and has to do with politics, because politicians make the laws that we in the court system enforce. And so it all sort of goes back to that. We don't have the right to say, well, we're going to enforce this law, we're not going to enforce it. We don't have that right. We have to deal with the laws the way they're written.
Okay.
Now, candidly, the way you get around this in a lot of cases is plea bargaining. So I don't know, maybe that's a question that's coming up, but you know, in a case that doesn't call for the imposition of the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole, an awful lot of cases get plea bargained down to second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter, and simply move the cases that way.
Do you believe that the death penalty helped deter crime in the U.S.?
Candidly, no. I honestly don't. I don't think anybody that goes in to rob a liquor store and shoots the place up is thinking about the death penalty. I think they're thinking about, how can I get $20 so I can get a fix of heroin? I don't think that, I think the death penalty in its, you know, Judeo-Christian sense is retribution. I don't think it is a deterrent, simply because I don't think there's any cause and effect from trying somebody, getting the death penalty imposed, and then maybe 10, 12 years later, the death penalty gets carried out, but most likely doesn't. I don't think, you know, it's got to be a punishment reward sort of thing that has to be a little closer to get people's attention than that. But no, I don't think the death penalty is a deterrent.
Yes, sir. We're almost done here.
See, I like talking about this stuff.
If there was an argument that you strongly disagreed with concerning the death penalty, what would it be?
That's a hard one.
Again, that is a very insightful question. You mean an argument about the way that it's carried out, the death penalty is carried out, or about the way, because I've seen that evolve. When I started out, North Carolina used the gas chamber, and now they've switched to lethal injection. Tell me what you mean by an argument. You mean
Like just a general argument?
philosophically?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that the thing that I think most people don't understand about lawyers is our personal opinions don't get involved in the defense of our cases. Okay? For the simple reason that most of the crimes that people are charged with committing, stealing, breaking and entering, shooting people, beating people up, those are not things that we as a group of defense lawyers particularly endorse, okay? I mean, it's the fact that I'm defending somebody charged with a crime doesn't mean that I believe that person had the right to commit that crime. I'm trying to prove that he didn't commit that crime or that the state can't link him to the crime. We're not defending the crime, we're defending the person who's charged with committing the crime, or we're prosecuting the person who's charged with committing the crime. And again, our personal feelings about certain things really don't come into play. I don't. We look at the law, we're charged with enforcing and dealing with the law, and that's how we do it. But I don't judge people. I don't say to people, you know, you're a bad person. I simply try to steer them through the process.
I believe you're a good lawyer because you do a good job of avoiding questions.
Well,
You do. Like, you know how to wiggle your way out of questions. So that's good. That's good. I can't hate you for that.
all right.
Yeah, good lawyer.
And
You're
this
smart
is my
lawyer.
last question. Do you believe that the death penalty is cheaper than life imprisonment?
No, absolutely, quantifiably not,
Okay.
because the cost of doing all of the appeals and other things, I think that kind of bean counter approach to the death penalty, I think, is wrong. If we are to have a death penalty, it ought to mean something. If we're not going to have a death penalty, let's don't play around with it.
Okay.
The ultimate cost of the prison system, you know, is kind of built into the system. It's not like if one person gets life imprisonment without parole, they're going to have to create a whole new prison. They have ways of forecasting what the prison population is going to be. I don't think the cost of incarcerating somebody or the cost of doing the appellate work is as important as finding out the truth. And the truth is what we're supposed to be looking at. It kind of gets wrapped up in politics sometimes, but we need to focus ourselves on finding the truth. Now, interestingly, science has done more over the time that I've been practicing than anything that I have seen in terms of proving whether people are guilty or innocent. DNA testing alone, the prevalence of video cameras everywhere, videotape everywhere, every building you go in, if you go to a major city, every move you make is on videotape or stored digitally now somewhere. And I think that has revolutionized the court system because it's a truth finder. You know, DNA is good science. DNA tells whether, you know, someone was present or did something. Videos are just absolutely conclusive these days.
Okay. Well, Mr.
Okay.
Bonnie, I'd just like to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
well, that's it.
Uh,
You got time, unless you
Okay.
got to be something.
I'm just not, I mean, we just went through all my questions.
Okay. Tell me a little something about it. Tell me, I know you go to Laney. What year are you at Laney?
Oh, then I'm a senior. This
You're a
is my
senior,
last
okay.
year.
So this is gonna be your senior project?
Yeah.